Apple sued over broken watch screens that injured customers. Customers claim watch doesn't provide enough room for battery. Apple has offered to replace some screens for free. Oh, is what's happening here that because it uses a lithium-ion battery and they expand when they are close to the end of their life, that when the battery expands, it makes the watch screen break and then, oh, let's see. Apple Inc.'s watch isn't all it's cracked up to be. Oh my God. Oh, you didn't just do that pun. A group of customers claims in a lawsuit over an alleged defect that it says can cause injuries. The customers say Apple, in its zeal for compactness, failed to provide enough room inside the watch to allow for the swelling of the internal battery. Sounds like the Samsung Note all over again. As a result, the watch screen can detach, crack, or shatter, the customer said. The detached, shattered, or cracked screens are a material and unreasonably dangerous safety hazard, the customer said in the complaint, filed Thursday in federal court in Oakland, California. The proposed class action lawsuit was filed by 4 Apple Watch customers. Included in the complaint is a photo of a deep slash on the arm of one of the customers, reportedly caused when her Series 3 Apple Watch screen detached. The screens are made of either Ion X glass, aluminum models, aluminum if Dave Jones is watching, or sapphire crystal glass, stainless steel and titanium models, and each have a razor-sharp edge on all 4 sides. Razor-sharp edge. Oh, that's gotta suck. Apple violated various consumer protection laws when it released the product with knowledge of the defect, according to the lawsuit. I'm curious what the proof is that they have knowledge of the defect. Do we get to see that they had knowledge of the defect? Because that's a big one. Like with the iPhone 6, a big part of the outrage came from the fact that with the 6 Plus, that Apple knew that they were failing in above average numbers, and not only did consumers have to fight in order to get that recall program for Touch IC, but they had to fight to be able to get it fixed for $149, which is not free. It's $149. But they had a fight to even get it fixed at all, much less $149. But there was evidence of that. There was actual internal documentation demonstrating that. Is there documentation demonstrating that they knew about this? Because, again, according to the lawsuit, they released a product with knowledge of defect, but I'd like to see the actual evidence of that if you have it. Because it's one thing to say that or assume it. It's another to actually prove it. And I think that there would be some burden to prove that. The group seeks to represent anyone who bought any model of the Apple Watch starting with the first generation in 2015 and continuing until last year. Owners of this year's model are not included. Apple didn't immediately respond to a request for comment. In 2019, the company announced a program to replace, free of charge, cracked screens on aluminum Series 2 and Series 3 watches. Okay, so maybe what they're saying is, listen, they were replacing the screens for free. Apple's not going to do this out of the kindness of their heart. They're only going to do that if they know they screwed up. Are they using that as the basis for it, or is there actual internal documentation? I imagine if you have Apple internal documentation that is sufficient enough for them to provide a recall program, then perhaps what they're pointing to is that if you're providing a recall program, you know it's an issue, which means that you probably should have stopped selling it and redesigned it. Maybe that's where they're going. And that probably isn't very far-fetched. You know, if you issue a recall, that recall then has to come with, okay, we're not selling that anymore. So again, I've done recalls at the store. We bought screens from this company, eTech Parts, a long time ago, and they were all dog shit back in like 2015 or 16. It was for a very short period of time. But once we figured out they were all dog shit, we called all the customers that got one, we replaced them, but we also changed vendors. So there was a recall and then a switch. If you announce a program to replace free of charge cracked screens, why are you doing that? It's not because you believe that, people deserve a warranty against accidental damage, because they've never done that. It would be because you know that there's something wrong with the product. And if you knew something was wrong with the product that was causing the screen to crack, but you kept selling it, that's, Apple has determined that under very rare circumstances, a crack may form. Oh my God. Listen to the language. They used to have a very small number, a small number, a small percentage. Now they're saying under very rare circumstances. I want to meet the person that writes these. I really do. Like, I just kind of wonder, is he actually smirking as he kind of writes this in script on a piece of paper, drafting it? Apple has determined that under very rare circumstances, a crack may form along the rounded edge of the screen, the company said in its website. The case is Smith versus Apple Inc., 421, U.S. District Court, Northern District of California, Oakland. I'm very curious to see how this works. Again, if they're able to actually prove that Apple knew that these were going to crack, that may be enough. There may be 2 different standards here. Either A, you need to prove that it cracked and that it was dangerous enough to actually cut you. There's also the argument, if you notice that your screen is cracked, wouldn't you take the watch off your wrist at that point? If you continue using a watch once it is cracked, is it Apple's fault? Or is it your fault that you continue to use it? Because you know that there's probably going to be people that see that their screen cracked on their watch, and they're just going to continue using it regardless of the fact that they have a piece of cracked glass right next to their wrist. There are people that are very stubborn and that are just going to keep doing the same thing. I have a question for you guys who are in the audience right now. If you had a watch and the screen on that watch cracked while it was on your wrist, would you take the watch off immediately? Would you say, okay, I'm going to wait till I get home to take this off? Or would you just not take it off at all? Like, I'm very curious. If I think I cracked it on my own, I probably would keep it on. But if I thought that the watch itself was cracking itself because the battery was expanding, I would take that shit off of my wrist immediately and toss it anyways. I think it really depends as to on why. Because I would probably have a device that was cracked on my wrist, no problem if I thought, oh, I did that. You know, I banged it against something in my car, or my cat messed with it, or I must have hit this thing harder than I thought. I'd probably have no problem with it. But if I knew that it was expanding on its own, then I would toss that shit off of my wrist immediately. And I wonder if they included that information in the recall. So when they said over here, Apple has determined that under 0.0000000000001% of very rare circumstances among very rare people that a crack may form, do they tell you that this crack is forming because the battery is expanding inside the device? Because I think a lot more people would have thrown the watch off at that point. Like, I don't want an item that's exploding on its own. If I broke an item, I'll keep it on me, but if the item is breaking itself, get the fuck away from my veins and arteries. I'm clumsy enough to wake up with some unexplained bruises. I assume my electronics also bear some brunt of that. That's possible. I'd be more worried about glass in my ear than on the top of my wrist. You know, I'd probably worry about both. People keep on using cracked phone screens and put them next to their ears, too. I think the difference there is the traditionalist is that the cracked phone screens are often self-inflicted harm rather than something that's actively expanding that also is a wearable. So for instance, you put your phone in your ear, but it's also in your hand, so you can drop it at any time and you can move it away, versus a watch that's expanding. And also, I'm kind of curious what the speed of the expansion is. Is this something that happens slowly over several weeks? Or is this something where the screen cracks and then it starts getting way bigger to the point where when you make a normal motion with your wrist that you always make, you know, it doesn't cut you at 1 o'clock, but then it cuts you at 3 o'clock? I think there's a lot of questions that are going to be really difficult to answer here to get a specific idea as to whether Apple should be culpable for this. Obviously, I'm biased in favor of Apple being held accountable for everything because I don't like them as a company, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the conclusion that I'm going to draw simply because of my own pre-existing biases. I'm not one of those people that says the battery can't be removable and also be a small device. I don't believe that when it comes to phones and laptops, anything else. But when we're talking about a watch or a smartwatch, like a watch that actually has a real CPU in it, not the $20 shit I used to get at Kmart. Why would, if the screen crack, cut your hand? Well, we're saying that the watch itself is expanding. I would be very curious to see how that happened. Well, I would want to hear the arguments from both sides here. I don't think there's enough here for me to just immediately blame Apple.